recaptured this afternoon, according to the U.S. Marshal's Office. Antoine Massey, who has been known for making social media posts as he's been on the run. He was one of the 10 inmates who escaped from the Orleans Justice Center several weeks ago now. He and Derek Groves were the only two remaining still on the run. But this afternoon, we have learned at WWL Louisiana that Antoine Massey has been recaptured. We just got off the phone moments ago with the U.S. Marshal's Office. They confirmed to us here at WWL Louisiana that he is, in fact, back in custody, that he was taken back into custody in the Holly Grove neighborhood. And investigative reporter Mike Perlstein is joining me on the set this afternoon. You just got off the phone with them. Tell me what else you know. This happened in Holly Grove, as I mentioned?
Right, in the 9400 block of Strolitz, not far from the Costco on the way to Metairie Road. This was all within the past hour, so this is very fresh news and information. Antoine Massey was found inside of a residence. He was alone. He, according to Brian Fair of the U.S. Marshal Service, he was captured without incident. In fact, he gave himself up once surrounded by law enforcement. This actually came from a Crime Stoppers tip, Katie. So we know that a $50,000 reward had been offered for some weeks now. They had been waiting on tips, in fact, pursuing some of them unsuccessfully until today. This tip panned out. Somebody will be collecting $50,000. It came through Crime Stoppers. Other agencies involved, the U.S. Marshals were kind of leading the search, but instrumental and at this residence were representatives of the New Orleans Police Department, Louisiana State Police, U.S. Marshals, of course, along with JPSO, not far from the Jefferson Parish border.
That's right on the line.
They assisted. Obviously, they were taking, no chances or risks with these. This particular escaped inmate being considered potentially armed, potentially dangerous, but it ended peacefully. He's now back in custody. Obviously, he'll be facing a charge of escape in addition to the previous charges for which he was being held at the Orleans Justice Center of domestic violence that included rape.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this area that we were looking at on your screen, this is a map where that house is, where Antoine Massey, one of the Orleans Justice Center escapees, was taken back into custody. If you're just joining us, that happened just a few moments ago. This area is really not too far from Xavier University's campus, which may be a bit unnerving for some parents out there who may be watching this, to know that Antoine Massey was hiding out in a house right there, not that far from the Costco, where a lot of people frequent. Hundreds, thousands of people go through that Costco every day. And apparently Antoine Massey did not get far when they escaped from the Orleans Justice Center, and remember, all 10 of them.
It was kind of assumed in the case of Antoine Massey in particular that he may not have gone far. We saw that previously he posted a video of himself on social media that was identified as a house near the fairgrounds, which was promptly descended upon by the law enforcement agencies. He had not been there, so assumed that whenever he videotaped that, it was sometime earlier before he posted it. But that gave them an idea that he probably had not fled across state lines or anything further. What is interesting, we've seen in many of these other escapees, accomplices arrested, booked with accessory to the escape. Right now, no such other people known to be involved in helping him, assisting him. Nobody was at that house in that Holly Grove area when they descended upon it to make that arrest. He gave himself up peacefully. Now, of course, we'll see once they debrief Antoine Massey if he provides any additional information. He was considered, Katie, one of the masterminds of the escape.
We learned that, yes, through the fact that they've arrested several other people, and so that has given us a bit of a paper trail as we've continued to cover this.
And he's been perhaps the most visible by popping up on social media. There had been many tips generated about his whereabouts, including the one himself going on social media. They were able to pinpoint a house there. It's now almost 6 weeks since that escape. it is really considered remarkable that, Massey up until today and Derek Groves, the
Yes.
other escapees still at large, managed to stay out for so long with such a large reward being offered.
Apparently one tip is all it took.
That's right. And, that is always the kind of mystery of being a fugitive. How many people know of the whereabouts? Yes. Who did he trust? Well, apparently, I don't know if it was him letting his guard down or somebody deciding 50,000 was just too tempting to pass up, but it was in fact a Crime Stoppers tip, and Brian Fair, the spokesman for the U.S. Marshal Service, said that reward will be collected by the tipster.
Yeah, well, obviously there's still a $50,000 reward for information out for Derek Groves. He's considered the other mastermind behind this operation. We do know that Groves had an ex-girlfriend who was actually an employee at the jail, correct?
Right. She was a guard.
And
right.
She was a guard at one point, has since been fired. However, that's the only person that we've known with ties to Groves. Now, if he and Massey were the two who coordinated this escape, there are going to be a lot of questions, asked and hopefully answered by Massey now that he's in custody.
And certainly, the more that time passed from that May 16th escape, the more the law enforcement was operating on the theory that the escaped inmates had gone their separate ways. They were no longer, say, together in hiding. The last pair were the two arrested in Texas. They got the furthest of anyone we know so far. And they were together in a car, arrested by authorities in Texas. But everyone else had been arrested separately. Generally, if you're going to cover your tracks and remain in hiding, the fewer people that know, the better.
Sure.
Acting in concert with another person could also put them in jeopardy of being caught.
Yes.
Massey was again caught in that 9400 block of Strolitz in Hollygrove by himself in a residence, and that's generally, it's almost kind of on the edge of Lakeview on the way to Metairie Road. You could describe it as behind the Costco. A relatively peaceful residential neighborhood.
Yeah, not really Lakeview, but Uptown. It's closer to Hollygrove borders Uptown,
right.
And other areas like that. Now, just a few moments ago, you were looking at a booking photo for one of the plumbers who was working at the jail, who has been accused of helping these inmates escape. Now, that affidavit in his arrest is where we got a tremendous amount of information about how this breakout happened. And that's when we first learned that Massey and Groves may have been the two that were the ringleaders behind this, and that they had been working together, that they had confronted this plumber allegedly. Plumber now tells a different story through his attorney, so all of those details are going to play out in court. I think that's when we're finally going to figure out exactly what happened, but you would assume that the U.S. Marshal's Office, the NOPD, every law enforcement agency, Louisiana State Police, which Troop NOLA has been essential in all of this, that they are all questioning Massey, that they are going to try and get as much information out of him as possible about, number one, how this went down, and number two, where Derek Groves might be. And
you mentioned in the case of the Sterling Williams, the maintenance man at the jail who was arrested, and in fact he was the first of the non-escapees to be arrested as a helping or an accomplice.
Yes.
And the initial account, I'm glad you used the word allegedly, because that's now in some dispute by his own attorney, but his allegation that he told detectives at the time of his arrest was that he was threatened with a shank, a crude homemade prison knife, that under that threat he turned off the water so that the inmates could crawl through a hole that they, I guess, punched through a wall of an empty cell behind a toilet and sink fixture. Later, once he got to court, his attorney gave a different account, that it was a matter of a plumbing issue and maintenance that led to him turning off the water.
He even said he was not threatened with a shank by these two inmates. That's what the lawyer said in court once Sterling Williams went to court. So this is definitely in dispute, not completely 100% fact at this point, but that is what law enforcement believed, and that is what was contained in that arrest affidavit.
But we do know, obviously, Antoine Massey was vocal by, and obviously some risk there on going on social media, giving a lengthy account in which, as you recall, he said, I didn't escape, I was let out, led to obviously a whole nother sequence of questions as to who might have been involved. Obviously,
Yes.
Sterling Williams is facing the charges of aiding the escape. Were there others? The Attorney General's office is deep into a criminal investigation into whether there was other inside help. But by all accounts, Antoine Massey, he was vocal when he was on that tier prior to all of this. He was vocal when he popped up on that social media claiming innocence in the underlying charges that put him there, domestic violence, up to and including a rape charge, as well as the escape itself. Kind of hard to make that argument while a fugitive on the run when you're not where you're supposed to be in custody. But nevertheless, we heard it, he said it. I didn't escape, I was let out.
Yes, he also has a lengthy rap sheet as well for prior crimes in addition to what he's facing now.
And you know, important to note that among the priors were 2 escapes, one from a jail and one from a juvenile detention center, as well as twice cutting off an electric ankle bracelet when he was out on bail. And so he's considered a 4-time escapee before this.
Which of course raises a lot of questions about the security of the jail, and we've been asking those as this has all played out about Susan Hudson and whether or not, you know, decisions were being made to house these people in a secure enough position that they required, given that 10 of them were able to escape and be undetected for hours when this first all unfolded. Oh,
so many questions, and we have multiple parallel investigations. You know, the AG kind of taking the lead on the criminal investigation into whether there was other inside help. But they, as we know from the very beginning, going over all of the video from inside the jail, that tier in particular, going and listening to the recorded telephone conversations that the inmates can make, you know, when they're locked up. And that has actually led to a lot of, you know, relevant clues and tips. Unknown if that played a role in Massey, but I understand it was just a tip that finally came that pinpointed his location. They acted on it quickly here, middle of the afternoon on a Friday in an otherwise peaceful residential neighborhood. And now we turn our attention to the one remaining escapee, Derek Groves.
We do, yes, and we're going to talk a lot more about him in just a few minutes, but this has really been a game of whack-a-mole with trying to find these inmates. They have descended on location after location after location, and this afternoon, as we know and as we've been reporting, we now know that Antoine Massey was taken into custody on Strelitz Street. Amelia Strahan is at the scene. She's joining us live now with the latest on what's happening out there. Amelia, I imagine there's a very heavy law enforcement presence, or at least there was.
Yeah, Katie, I believe there was. It has mostly cleared out from what we can see here from the 9400 block of Strelitz Street. We're told Antoine Massey's around 6 weeks on the run have come to a close now. And we actually checked the distance from Orleans Justice Center, and we're only about 1.5 miles away. So after over a month on the run, he was located here on Strelitz Street in the Holly Grove neighborhood. We're told multiple law enforcement agencies were involved in this arrest. We're also told that he did not put up any kind of fight. Now, NOPD is going to have the latest information on this arrest and on the inmates on the run tonight at 5:30. And of course, WWL is going to have our Lily Cummings there. So we'll learn more about how the arrest went down here on Strelitz Street in Holly Grove. Now, that, of course, just leaves Derek Groves left on the run. This makes 9 of the 10 inmates that escaped Orleans Justice Center back in May captured. So now 6 weeks after big development, I believe this is actually 6 weeks to the day or very close to it. And again, found just about 1.5 miles away from the Justice Center. So we're looking forward to learning more details about this arrest. But again, for what we know now, Massey did not put up a fight with law enforcement, and he was arrested here on the 9400 block of Strelitz Street. Like I said, law enforcement appear to have cleared out of this area. area, but hopefully we'll learn more now that we know there were multiple law enforcement agencies involved. I'm sure when this arrest happened, it was a heavily patrolled area. So as we get those updates, we will keep you updated. And again, this is, around 6 weeks since that escape. So we're looking forward to hearing what the NOPD has to say tonight at 5:30.
Amelia, can you pan around and show us what the neighborhood looks like in that area? I'm just curious if it's just a regular residential neighborhood or, was he sitting in the middle of a bunch of houses of people who just had no idea that he was in there? I think a lot of people at home might have those same questions. So what does the neighborhood look like where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me step out of the frame really quickly so you guys can kind of get a better look. There are other news crews here as well. Everyone's interested to see what happened here. It looks like a lot of just residential, there's a bunch of houses. There are some people with nicely kept gardens over there. It looks like a really peaceful street. We've seen a few families come in and out of their houses. So it's not exactly the kind of place you would expect someone to hide. It looks very peaceful, very, like a family-friendly area. Like I said, we've seen a few people come in and out, not heavily trafficked. Again, this is Strolitz Street, 9400 block, Holly Grove. Again, very residential area, and it appears to be peaceful right now, Katie.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a high fence. If that is the correct address, I'm assuming that you're standing in front of, there's a high fence there. Looks like the yard is well kept. It raises all these questions about whether or not he was in an abandoned house, whether or not someone who owned the house knew that he was staying in there. I'm sure those questions are all being asked by law enforcement tonight. But it's very interesting that it's already cleared out. They must have swooped in and cleared out, Amelia.
That's exactly what we thought whenever we pulled up. We were expecting to see a lot of cars, and it was clear. But again, we know there were multiple law enforcement agencies, and they've had their eyes on this guy for a long time. So hopefully that arrest was swift. Like we are hearing from law enforcement, he didn't put up a fight. That may be part of why the scene has already cleared. And of course, after so many weeks of hard work by our law enforcement agencies, we're happy to hear that it seemed to be a smooth arrest for the most part. And again, that's just what we're hearing from law enforcement right now, but we're going to get more information. Now, as far as that house goes, I heard you mention the high fence. I'm not 100% sure that is the home. We're told it was on this block. Now, hopefully that's a question that we will hear more from NOPD about tonight. But again, all of these houses look, well kept. Looks like people live here. So, there have been a number of accomplices that have been arrested. So it'll be interesting to see, if he was here alone, if he was with someone, if he had help. All of those questions we don't know the answers to now, but hopefully we have more from NOPD tonight at 5:30.
All right. Thanks so much, Amelia. And a lot of those neighbors are going to have a lot of questions themselves about what was happening at that house next door. So thank you so much for that. And we are just getting into the WWL Louisiana newsroom. The latest picture that we have of Antoine Massey after he was captured. You can see it here on your screen right now. It appears that heavily armed law enforcement officers took him into custody again peacefully this afternoon, from what we hear from the U.S. Marshal's office. That is Massey with handcuffs on, being walked by those heavily armed law enforcement. I can't tell which agency. It looks like it just says police on their vests from where I'm standing. But, this is a picture that we got just into the WWL Louisiana newsroom. And you can see underneath the super that's on your screen, that banner at the bottom of your screen, law enforcement agency insignias mentioned there, 5 of them, 5 different law enforcement agencies, all apparently working together to bring this escaped inmate back into custody. He is now going to be facing a number of other charges in addition to the ones that he was already in Orleans Justice Center for, awaiting trial, Mike.
Well, certainly the escape, and I know that has an opportunity. He was very vocal when he posted that social media video about claiming his innocence and wanting to fight charges against him, including the escape, which he said he was let out. It'll be interesting to see if he's that vocal when being debriefed by the investigators who have been chasing him, and really, I can tell you, pursuing tips that we heard of a few early on that came up empty. I can tell you I spoke to law enforcement this week The tips did continue to roll in much more quietly. They very intentionally wanted to give the impression that the heat was turned down a bit, maybe hoping for either Groves or Massey to let their guard down, slip up. What would be interesting, I know that we're going to check the neighbors where he was finally captured in that residence. My guess is that they probably did not know a thing.
I would think. Can you imagine finding out that one of the escapees is hunkered down next door? I imagine that's terrifying.
For one, here's a guy who had successfully, eluded law enforcement up to this point, so he certainly wasn't signaling where he was, and with a $50,000 reward hanging over your head, any neighbor who got wind that, hey, Antoine Massey is here, I can call this tip in and get some money. On top of that, Antoine Massey, as we've seen from the photographs and his mugshot especially, has very visible facial tattoos.
He's very distinctive in his appearance because of those tattoos on his face. And so it's crazy to think about the fact that he was one of the last two captured, given how recognizable he is. So it just makes you wonder, what's been going on throughout this time, how he has managed to, get information. Now we want to go to Amelia Strahan again, so let's listen in to the interview that she's doing right now.
I understand sensitive situation, but I guess your thoughts, this is an inmate, inmate that has been on the run for quite some time. If you can. Yes, ma'am. Your thoughts on Antoine Massey being here on your property?
I don't know what's going on, sir. I don't know. I really don't.
Gotcha.
Are you shocked?
I'm very shocked. Yes. I don't want to be on the news. I don't know what's going on. Where's the police? I don't even know what's happening. I get a call and I'm just coming and everything's over. I really don't know. All I know is they found the guy here and that's it. I don't know what's going on.
Were the police here when you got here?
I just got here right now. I don't see no one here but you all.
So it was cleared out?
I don't know. I mean, I can open the gate. I just don't want to be on camera. That's all.
For sure.
So police told you it was at this address?
Yes.
And do you know anything about the tenant?
There's no tenant here. It's just a family house. Like I say, I'll normally do Airbnb, but I'll keep it open. I just keep it open all the time because we have a gate.
A family that he was here with?
I don't know anything, man. I really don't. I don't know anything.
Yeah. How many units is this?
Two.
Two?
Yeah.
2 units and you own it?
Yes, I own it.
Well, I do appreciate your time, ma'am.
No problem. I'm still trying to find out what's happening.
Thank you so much.
Much information as far as today.
Thank you. You said you don't.
Sorry, y'all. I just don't want to be on the news.
Yeah.
Trying to find out what's going on myself.
I understand. Would you mind saying a few words with us if we don't put your face on the camera? If
That's
we point it
Amelia
towards the ground?
Strahan. She is out at the scene where this inmate was found this afternoon. A woman who says that she uses that unit as an Airbnb from time to time. Said she really didn't want to go on camera, so we were trying not to show her face there. Apparently that's where Antoine Massey was hiding out, and that's where he was taken into custody. It's very interesting that even the property owner was not told by law enforcement what was going down when it was going down. So that tells you just how much they had to secretly inject themselves into that situation as to not alert Antoine Massey that they were on to him, go in there, get him peacefully, and get him out of there as quick as they went in almost.
And I can tell you, from a house that they approached earlier this week, this was on a Derrick Groves tip, that law enforcement did assemble in force with multiple different agencies, and they very, very intentionally did not make, say, a SWAT scene or surround a house. They kept it completely kind of
quiet.
Almost like undercover surveillance to determine if, in fact, Derrick Groves was at that location.
Right, and
he was not.
We're going to go back out to Amelia again. Apparently, she's got some more information for us. So, Amelia, what you got for us?
And explain the situation because this is two properties.
Hey guys, we're actually talking to the woman who owns let's turn the camera this way. We're actually talking to the woman that owns the Airbnb where Antoine Massey was allegedly found. She doesn't want her face on camera. We want to respect her request. So I'm going to get Robin to put the camera back down and we're going to ask her a few questions. You guys can listen in.
I'm here and I don't even see cops.
I mean, is it shocking to hear this happen not only on your property but in your neighborhood? Because a lot of people we spoke to say they were just talking to someone just cutting grass here earlier today, and then this happened.
Yeah, it's a pretty quiet neighborhood. It's kind of shocking, but hey, things like this happen. We just have to, kind of be careful, I guess, you know.
Have you seen any signs of this? Anything suspicious?
Seen any signs? No.
And it's only one tenant you were telling us that lives here.
Yes, only one tenant.
And you said telling me when you were closing the gate that Antoine Massey might have run in, broken in.
Right, because I'm frustrated too. I don't know what's happening. They say this is going on, and I get here and I don't even see a cop. So, you know, so I don't know.
So
And
who
what do
actually
you know
called
about
you
the
and gave you that
family?
call?
Do you know anything about the family, the tenant that was staying there?
No, I don't know anything about that.
Who actually called you and alerted you of what was going on at your property?
My friend called me. A friend of mine. I guess it's all over the news, and they know my property. So
Did she see the whole arrest happen, or just the law enforcement presence?
it's just the law enforcement. Yeah.
In your message to NOPD, you weren't even really notified.
I don't have a message anymore. I'm really, you know, I'm shocked right now. Sorry.
All right, thank you so much.
All right,
ma'am.
thank you so
And
much.
Travers and,
All right, now I'll pull the camera back up, guys. Yeah, so like we mentioned, this was a quiet street. Now we just heard from the woman who owns the Airbnb. Robin, I'm going to get us to turn around really quickly. You can see there's a really high gate here. She says that she knew nothing about this until her neighbor called. She says it is 2 units in this the property, but there was only one family staying there. Now she said she doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know if, you know, potentially he broke in. She doesn't know if there's any association with the family. She said she is really in the dark right now. She wasn't on the property when this happened, and she pulled up and there were unmarked vehicles in the driveway. So again, Antoine Massey, like we've said, 6 weeks on the run, 1.5 miles from the Justice Center. This is where he was arrested. This is the 9400 block of Strolich Street in the Holly Grove neighborhood. Again, we were talking to the woman that owns the Airbnb where he was allegedly arrested, and she said that it's a really quiet neighborhood, and she used the word several times, shocked. She said, I am shocked to hear that this happened. She said, I never expected it would happen on my property. So she didn't want to show her face on camera. Understandably, this is a high stress situation for her and really caught her off guard. She wasn't able to share much about the family that lives in this Airbnb, or was staying in the Airbnb at the time, rather. But she did say it's a 2-unit property. Only one of them was occupied, and we're waiting to hear more details from police. Now, I want to give you guys a look at the neighborhood, because like she mentioned, it looks pretty quiet. I'm going to walk you down the street here. There aren't a lot of people outside. There are some, it looks like, you know, homes over here, really well-kept yards. We've seen a few families walk in and out. So definitely a quiet area. The Airbnb, you can see it has this pretty tall fence, very well kept. And the woman who owns the Airbnb again said she was completely shocked whenever she found out that he was located here. Of course, she's been watching this on the news. So it was kind of one of those I never expected it to happen to me kind of moments. Again, we are told he did not put up a fight. When we got here, there was no law enforcement presence. There were no cop cars, no investigators. So because we're told that he did not put up any kind of fight, we're wondering if it was, you know, maybe a swift arrest. Now, the owner of the property said that she was not notified by police. She was notified by a neighbor. So a lot of questions here. But again, she used the word shocked several times, was very cooperative. So it'll be interesting to hear what we hear from NOPD tonight at 5:30. I believe our Lily Cummings is going to be at that press conference. We're supposed to hear more about this arrest, what happened. And again, we're waiting to hear more information about, you know, what kind of tips led to this. There are still a lot of questions. But again, this is 6 weeks after the escape. Derek Groves is the only inmate left on the run out of the 10 that escaped Orleans Justice Center. So this could be coming to a close soon. So we'll have those latest updates tonight at 5:30. Amelia Strahan, WWL, Louisiana.
All right. Thank you so much, Amelia, for bringing us all that new detailed information. So let's just recap really quickly. If you're just joining us, Antoine Massey, as you can see on your screen right now, was taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals Service this afternoon at around 4:30, maybe a little earlier, sometime after 4 o'clock today, let's say, in a house in Holly Grove. It's an Airbnb. Half of that duplex was rented. And the property owner who just showed up at the scene said that she had no idea that Antoine Massey was holed up in one side of that duplex. There's a large privacy fence that surrounds the house where Antoine Massey Massey was taken back into custody. I'm assuming that was one of the reasons that he was hiding out there. But what we're hearing is that the U.S. Marshal Service and 5 different law enforcement agencies worked together today to respond to a Crime Stoppers tip that led them straight to that house to Antoine Massey. Investigative reporter Mike Perlstein has been with me on set talking about how this capture took place today, what we've learned so far as we continue to get new details about that. 5:30, as Amelia mentioned, is when we are expecting the NOPD and law enforcement agencies to hold a more detailed press conference to give us extensive information about exactly what went down today.
And you know, I certainly expect that now that Massey's in custody, there will be a reminder of Derek Groves.
Yes.
He's the remaining escapee, still unaccounted for. And he was often considered perhaps the most potentially dangerous,
yes,
because he's been convicted in not one but 2 murders for which he was about to get the mandatory life sentence. So a lot at stake. Obviously, he's been convicted in violent crimes. In addition to the 2 counts of murder at trial, he pled guilty to 2 additional counts of manslaughter.
So that's 4 deaths attributable to
right.
Derek Groves, and this man is still on the run. There has been very little sign of him other than the fact that police arrested this former guard at Orleans Justice Center who said that she had an on-again, off-again romantic relationship with Groves. She's the only person tied to him who has been arrested so far, and it makes you wonder how hot they are on his trail as well.
And remember, that woman arrested as called a girlfriend of Derek Groves, she had been a guard.
Yes.
She had been, fired and booked with, attempt introduction of contraband that was apparently caught, before she could actually bring it into the jail. And now, sometime later, has this alleged reconnection with Derek Groves. I guess caught on some of the telephone calls that they were able to, pull up the recordings and determine that she was aiding. And I know some of those calls were prior to the escape. Interesting to see if, some of that led to some of the additional investigation on Derek Groves. But I can tell you, in a tip earlier this week in which a tip came in on Groves' whereabouts, the approach by law enforcement was not to make a highly visible raid. They kept completely incognito in a neighborhood in New Orleans, as a matter of fact, and not to either scare someone into fleeing out of a back door, alarm the neighborhood. They were able to determine stealthily that Derek Groves was not at the location where they got the tip. They quietly went away. I don't think that the law enforcement presence was ever felt in that false tip earlier in the week. So now, obviously, we're going to hear a reminder that Derek Groves, considered potentially armed and dangerous, has a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to his capture.
Yeah, we saw early on in this escape when law enforcement was, as I said, playing whack-a-mole of sorts. They would get a tip, they would go in full force, the drones were out, it was huge police presence, and it was happening over and over again.
We saw helicopters.
Borrowed from Jefferson Parish and other places, and NOPD, full presence, Louisiana State Police and Troop NOLA out there. And so since then, we've seen a much different strategy, and apparently that paid dividends today as they took Antoine Massey back into custody. Now, this is that social media video that Massey posted a few weeks ago after his capture, claiming that he was let out of Orleans Justice Center, that he did not, in fact, escape. However, all evidence points to the contrary. So we're going to have to see what he has to say to law enforcement now that he is back in custody today.
And that's an important point, simply because he stated that. It's in a recorded social media post. And he now has that opportunity to explain, what did you mean when you said that you were let out and that you did not actually escape?
Yeah, right. I mean, there are big questions, I think, for Antoine Massey, as he's probably being interrogated as we speak, Mike. You would assume that they are, moving as quickly as they can to get any information that he might have, number one, about how this escape happened, and number two, about where Derek Groves might be. And Sharice Gibson joining us now here on set as we prepare for our 5 o'clock news, since we've been breaking into programming. So we're going to have much more on this escape as we move throughout the minutes and hours to come.
People are still talking about it and still talking about Derek Groves, who is still out there. And the question is, everyone thinks, and some experts have mentioned that Derek Groves probably has some support and some help. And of course, we'll learn more about Antoine Massey and where he was found in Holly Grove.
Right, and you know, perhaps a debriefing of Antoine Massey could at least help investigators understand you cannot stay in hiding without some connection to clothes, food, shelter.
The minutes are
Talk about it
numbered.
in a second.
That's right.